If I had to go back to learning the spinal tracts, this is how I would have done it. This is a very difficult concept for a lot of students just because you get a picture of a bunch of cross sections of the brain and then you have to memorize the pathways where the messages start, where they end. For the ascending and descending tracts, it can get very complicated and a lot of it is repetition, but I like to say that having a big picture idea of things first helps to, and you can get into the details later, really helps with retention. So I completely understand if it's intimidating first, but I like to simplify things in a way that makes sense to me at least. So I like to think of the spinal tracts as you're going on a road trip and you're going to have a starting point where the messages of the brain start, and then they're going to go on the road trip. At some point, they're going to cross over. So this is like, for example, with stroke patients, getting a little bit more into the pathology, one part of the brain might be affected, but then they're presenting with deficits on the other side, and this is why the spinal tracts where they cross. So you're starting the road trip at one part of the brain and then you're crossing over at some point. Some of them stay on the same side, so that does help to the confusion as well, but sometimes they stay on the same side, sometimes they cross over, and then they have an endpoint. So in a nutshell, that's what the spinal tracts are, a starting and an endpoint, and maybe they stay on the same side of the body, which would be the same side presentation, or they cross over. And I came up with a study method that would have helped me a lot if I thought of it back then, but you basically become the spinal tracts, and that sounds a little out there, so I'm going to show you an example in a couple seconds, but you start at one part of the brain, maybe you have sticky notes, maybe you're just acting it out, walking. I found that moving when I'm studying also helps me to stay alert when I'm tired, so I'm going to show you an example. And so this looks a little crazy, but stay with me. An example we're going to look at is the rubrospinal tract. So it starts in the midbrain, so that's where the road trip is starting, and then it's going to cross right over. You can kind of see where this is going, but so it starts in the midbrain, it starts at the red nucleus, and then it crosses at the ventral tegmentum. I did not memorize this, I looked it up. And then it goes to the pons, and then it goes to the medulla, and then the spinal cord.